So, one of the things that allowed for the growth of the early church was the presence of Jews out into the wider world. They spoke what we could call the language of trade, of commerce, and of government in this area. That was the language of Greek. Not only did they speak that language, but their faith and heritage had begun to be translated into that cultural context. So when we talk about the Septuagint, as mentioned earlier, we have a translation of the scripture from Hebrew into Greek done before the birth of the early church, before the birth of Christ. That is a major stepping stone of bringing the gospel to non-Jews. Because here is a document that the early church can work off of that people who are not Jews can understand and relate to. So part number 3. Look at Acts chapter 16, verses 1 to 5. Now, when you read this, I want you to appreciate how confusing this all gets, because this is kind of our point that we started with. When we deal with people in the church, we're not always dealing with a group of people at the same point, spiritually, or even in terms of church background. And one of the challenges for the church is to address people spiritually where they are at, because we can create a situation where somebody who's been in the church for 40 years is not challenged to grow. Conversely, we can create an environment where somebody who is 6 months into the faith and just blown away and overwhelmed by all that they need to try and do. And so the work of the church must always be trying to work between these two extremes, as it were. And the early church, in its own way, but in a different way, was dealing with this. Now, let's look at Acts chapter 18 and verses 1 to 8 also. Look at verses 4 and 7. What type of people do we find here? Now look below. I've given you a little chart to fill in. We will come back when we come to number 4 and explain what each of these three are.